Welcome to the Mayor's Update for April 2016. I'm Megan Pembroke, Communications Director for the City of Everett. Each month we sit down with Mayor Ray Stephanson to talk a little bit about issues and topics that are important to you. Mayor, welcome.
Thank you. Happy spring.
Yes, it's starting to get nice out there.
Yeah, longer days. I like that.
A little bit more sun.
Yeah.
Well, Mayor, I wanted to start out today, as we often do, talking about the Streets Initiative.
Yes.
Can you give us a little recap on what's happened in the last month since we've chatted?
Sure. We have our first 5 units identified for the chronically homeless. Our goal still is to have 20 units available for the most vulnerable by July. And we need a little help with landlords who may be watching. The vacancy rate is low, so it's hard to find available units. And I think there's a fear probably that just maybe the fear of the unknown. What will these tenants be like? Guaranteed rent. We'll make sure they're monitored in terms of behavior. If there's any serious issues, we'll make sure that people are removed. So it's a pretty low risk situation. So any landlords, anybody who knows of any apartment units available, that would be helpful to let you know, or let our office know. The bigger issue is our first capital program, which has a $2 million investment for that and other things from the city. We're applying for $1 million from the county, which was included in their 2016 budget. And we have a $2 million ask of the legislature, and we've gotten very positive response both in the House and Senate. They're wrapping up, and then the governor will sign those bills. You may have read he's threatened to veto everything if they don't finish in time. So hopefully that won't happen. So we'll know shortly about the $2 million for that. So that's very positive. We are looking at a number of locations in Everett for the right location for low barrier housing. I think we'll know that within 60 to 90 days. And I want to give a big shout out to Catholic Community Services, who have a lot of experience statewide in housing the homeless, and they've been partners with us and really have guided us. I mean, we're new to this. We don't do this every day, and they've been really terrific to work with. And then, of course, the Housing Authority is the vehicle to provide Section 8 housing vouchers, and so we continue to work with them to make those available. That's critically important in terms of the ongoing expense for housing.
Great, and I know we'll be talking a lot more about housing this year. Mm-hmm. One of the other things we did this past month, I know we've heard from a lot of community members who want to know how they can help. Sure. What can they do, especially some of these success stories we've shared where people are ready to make the move into housing or into treatment. And so we've established a fund that people can donate to. Can you talk a little bit about that? Sure. And what it'll be used for?
Well, people just have been very generous and very supportive of helping the less fortunate. Doesn't surprise me. This is a great community, but a number of people have said, how can I donate? You can go online on the City of Everett website, and it'll tell you, and I think that you have to put in, the City of Everett and then Streets Initiative or Housing. I think that's how you find it. More specifically, but you can find out how to donate, and so we'll capture those donations. I think later we'll probably do a larger capital campaign, but it's very heartwarming to see people reach out and want to help. And I still thank the 23 citizens who were part of the Streets Initiative task force. They stay involved. As you know, we're working this every day at the City of Everett with staff and other municipalities. So I think we're doing it. We're doing it, I think, the right way. Our philosophy has been to provide that permanent housing for the chronically homeless that gives them the opportunity to get off the street and get the help that they need, whatever their affliction, whatever their disease, they need that kind of help. What we want to avoid is just this proliferation of tent cities and some of the things that we see in other cities that all experts say that that's just a really ineffective way to deal with the chronically homeless. And so I think we're doing it the right way. It's time consuming. It takes, a fair amount of time to make this happen. I mean, for Salt Lake City, it was 10 years, and they accomplished about 1,000 housing units. If we can do that in a decade, I think that will be a tremendous success for our community.
And for those who are interested, that website is everett.gov/streetsfund. That's how they can find that.
Good.
And then in terms of some of those other things we're doing, I know there's been some coverage lately of how our police department is responding to the increase in drug use on the streets. I know they've got the social workers coming on board. Can you talk a little bit about how they're adjusting what they do?
Absolutely. Policing is changing. Dan Templeman, our chief, is a terrific leader, and our officers have just been terrific in the way they've responded. So a lot of the interaction that occurs between a police officer and someone on the streets is not confrontational. It is, what's your situation? How can I help? What is the help that you need? Who are you? And then with those situations where we come in contact with those individuals, we are in the process of hiring the 2 embedded social workers, and they'll be on the payroll soon. And we have help from someone on loan from the county now, so we have that service. But the other thing that our citizens should know is all of our officers now are equipped with an drug-induced nasal spray that really reverses an overdose, particularly with heroin. And they literally will bring people back who their heart has stopped and they're not breathing. And we've had about 20 saves since we started this program. The county was recognized nationally as one of the best counties, and by far the majority of saves have been in the city of Everett. Those are 20 souls that we would have lost prior to this program. So thank goodness we have it, and our officers are well trained. The other thing that our citizens should know is we are required now to have 8 hours of training for every officer for this policing that I'm talking about, this interaction about social services and help and sort of the human needs part of it. The chief has taken this an extra step, and every officer will be required to go through 40 hours of training, and that will really reinforce the kind of policing that we're migrating to. But I want to make sure our citizens realize that if you're out there dealing and selling and breaking the law, the same consequences that have always been there will be there in the future. You're going to get arrested. You're going to, you're going to do the time for the crime. So we're not letting the bad people get away, and they're often the ones that are preying, unfortunately, on the homeless. So I think that we're really moving in the right direction. I think this SAVE program has really been a very effective tool.
Well, and kind of tied to what we've been talking about with police, I know the other program that's starting up in April is the Work Crew program, was one of the recommendations of the Streets Initiative. What do you hope to see out of that program?
Well, I think it's really a way for those who have committed a minor crime to give back to the community. Oftentimes, they don't have the financial means to pay a fine. That fine may be $100 or $500 or $1,000. So this gives them a way of working that off. And it's really, I think, very appealing to the public, because oftentimes the areas that are really become pretty messy have been, people on the sidewalks and people who are homeless who really have thrown trash. And well-intended citizens who bring sleeping bags and clothes and food, oftentimes, one use and it gets discarded. And so what the public will begin to see on April 1st is a work crew that will be supervised by a retired police officer, and we're very fortunate to make that transition that way. And they'll have work crews out that will be identified as Streets Initiative work group that are cleaning up the community. And so I think that will be very effective. The one thing that I've noticed down south, a city south of us, and you see it now at exits along the freeway, are tents and just tremendous amounts of trash and really unsanitary conditions just outside the tent door of many people. It's really pretty disheartening to see. We don't fortunately have that degree of a problem, but this is a way to deal with it effectively, I think.
Well, great. Well, thank you for all of those updates. There's a lot going on, and I know we'll be talking about it again next month.
We will be.
We're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we'll get an update on the legislative session and the mayor's upcoming trip to Washington, D.C.
Hi, I'm Jerry. Normally, I'd be in the back hefting 50-pound bags of flour, but I injured my ankle. Doctor says I gotta stay off my foot, so my boss gave me a light-duty job while I recover.
It's Labor and Industry Stay-at-Work program. He and his doctor filed online while I applied to get half his base wages reimbursed while he recovers.
I get to stay on the job.
And I get to keep a valued employee. It's a win-win.
And it turns out I got a knack for decorating cakes.
Who knew?
Learn more about light-duty options at stayatwork.lni.wa.gov.
Welcome back to the Mayor's Update. Well, Mayor, this time of year we often check in on Olympia and see what our legislators have been doing. I know this was a challenging session in a lot of ways, but I understand we fared pretty well in terms of some of our priorities. Can you remind us about what we were hoping to accomplish and kind of give us a recap on how we fared?
Sure. So the state uses a 2-year budget planning process. So in 2015 was the year that they did, the 2-year budget plan. Then in the off years, like 16, they do just an update. They take the revenue, whether it's gone up or down, and they make adjustments. So there's a little bit of room for programs, and we, like other municipalities, applied for a number of specific programs and funding for those programs. And we have really fared pretty well. We asked for $3 million to start doing significant planning on westbound US 2 trestle. As a reminder, that trestle is as old as the viaduct in Seattle, and its condition is not good. I don't think it would survive an earthquake. But the reason that we made that ask is more about the fact that the federal government has passed its first transportation budget in, I think, 6 years. So you want to be, the term is shovel ready. You want to have all the engineering, all the work done. So if you have an opportunity to pursue federal funding, we'll talk about that a little bit in our trip to DC, you're ready and you can accept those funds. And that's really a terrific opportunity for us. So both houses have supported $1.5 million. Half of that, so we can start the process. Again, I think a significant win and very important, not just for Everett, but the entire region. I talked a little bit about our $2 million ask for low barrier housing. It's gotten strong support from both the House and the Senate, and we're hoping that it'll survive all the arm waving and get to the governor's desk and be signed. The other programs probably are not directly the city of Everett. There is funding to start the ag program with Washington State University. Not as robust as the request, but still some 600,000 is our latest count. So that'll start the program and be very important for WSU to fulfill its mission for the 4 counties in North Puget Sound. So, some modest success, and and success when a lot of other municipalities haven't had any.
Oh, great.
Yeah, so it's good.
Well, and the Mayor, I know in early this month, you're going to be taking a trip back to Washington, D.C., which you've done pretty regularly over the last several years, with a special focus on Naval Station Everett. You'll be meeting with military officials, taking some other members of the community with you. Can you tell us a little bit about the purpose of that trip and what you hope to accomplish?
Absolutely. So a big part of this visit will be to the Pentagon and talking to Navy leadership. The reason that that's important is the turnover in Navy leadership occurs annually. So the people that we talked to a year ago, it's a good bet that half of them will be on a new assignment. So you have to constantly remind people about who you are. You have to be, part of our reason in being there is so they don't forget us. We have to remind them about the assets of the base, which is it's modern, it's energy efficient. 350 feet of water off the end of the pier where the aircraft carrier is home ported. Really a day faster steaming to Asia than in California. A lot of people don't realize that. And so we take the opportunity to talk with leadership at the Pentagon about that. We also are there to thank them for assigning 3 destroyers that'll arrive this year in Everett, and then most recently a 4th destroyer, a newly commissioned destroyer will come next year in 2017. So, that'll be, it's about 300 sailors per ship and families. So that'll be a good boost to our economy and our schools and our businesses, and rental housing is available there and waiting for those folks to come and to show up. So we want to thank them obviously for that. We also will have the county executive with us, the director of the port, as well as myself and other city officials. We want to make sure that they know that we're united. We want to make sure that we recognize the value of the Kimberly-Clark property for a potential maritime use. The Navy has significant maintenance requirements for their ships, and I think having the ability to do some building and some repair in the maritime business would be very important to be very close to Naval Station Everett. We talked about that last year. We got a lot of positive response. We want to update them that the port has taken an additional step now to secure that property, and I think that'll be welcome news as well. And then we'll go to the Hill. We'll meet with our representatives and 2 U.S. senators. Having a transportation budget, we want to remind them about US 2, obviously. US 2 is probably one of the most important corridors in the state of Washington. I used to joke with Pat McLean that if an elected official could figure out how to solve the US 2 problem, that person could easily be elected governor. But the point is, we have really one significant east-west route, and that's I-90. That's more than a 2-lane road. And so US 2 is not safe. We just need to find ways to expand it from really Everett to Wenatchee. But it's going to be a generation issue, really. We obviously got to get westbound US 2 fixed. If we lose that, all that traffic floods into Marysville and it just create a tremendous amount of gridlock. So that's first, but we need to keep advocating for a widening of US 2 the entire route. And that's something that our US senators and our representatives can really help us with. So that's, it'll be, these trips are from early in the morning until late at night, so it'll be 3 or 4 days of real intense meetings, and then the red eye back, I think, Thursday night in early April. So.
Well, great. Well, Mayor, thanks for all these updates. We're going to take another quick break, and when we come back, we'll have a special staff guest to talk with us a little bit more about the Streets Initiative and our upcoming work crew program.
Everett Community College was a perfect choice for me because it was close to home and it allowed me to pursue a higher education without going into debt. Small class sizes at Everett Community College really helped me to develop relationships with faculty and fellow classmates. I really made some great lifelong friends, and the faculty and fellow classmates really helped me pursue not only my education, but also help cultivate my passion for helping others.
Welcome back to the Mayor's Update. This month we're adding a new feature and inviting a special staff guest to join us each month to talk in more detail about one of the topics that the Mayor has covered during his program. Today we're pleased to be joined by Hil Kaman, the city's lead prosecutor, and Hil's going to talk with us a little bit about the work crew program and your work with the Streets Initiative. So welcome.
Thank you.
We're glad to have you here to be our first special staff guest.
I'm excited to be here and talk to you about what we do in the prosecutor's office.
So start out by telling us a little bit about yourself, what you do with the city, and your role with the Streets Initiative.
I lead the prosecutor's office, where we file all of the misdemeanor and gross misdemeanor crimes into the Everett Municipal Court. And we also run a number of diversion programs for people who have crimes that are appropriate for those programs.
And before we talk about diversion, you also have a big part in the CHART program, which was one of the first kind of early successes to come out of the Streets Initiative Task Force and their report. Can you talk a little bit about what CHART is and how that's changed how the city approaches the challenge of some of our chronic utilizers of our emergency systems?
CHART started as a way to address those individuals who were repeatedly within our court system and in our jail, and despite our repeated prosecutions, nothing seemed to change their behavior. They were often individuals with lower level crimes such as trespass and shoplifts. We began to talk with other people within the police, the fire department, the jail. Eventually, Providence Emergency Room joined us, and also Snohomish County Human Services, and realized that we saw a lot of the same people that they saw. We started to collaborate and talk about different ways in which we can address the underlying issues that those individuals had, and if there was a way to reduce their impact on the emergency response system. So that would be the criminal justice system, the emergency rooms, the jail, and the number of times that police and fire respond to those individuals.
And for the public, how do you define a chronic utilizer? I mean, these are people who are spending a lot of time in the emergency rooms, a lot of time in jail. They account for a lot of resources in terms of both city resources and some of the other organizations in the community, right?
Mm-hmm. So CHART stands for Chronic Utilizer Alternative Response Team, and we define a chronic utilizer for our purposes as somebody who hits up those various systems. So emergency room, police, fire, courts, jail, at least 6 times in 6 months, and they have to touch on 3 of those systems. And then we identify all of those individuals and then rank them based upon the degree in which they are impacting us at a current time, and get together a group of social service providers to talk about ways in which we can address the underlying issues of homelessness, mental health, chemical addiction, and find ways to reduce their impact on those systems.
And you mentioned that some of the more traditional ways that we've been approaching these people, you know, oftentimes through the criminal justice system, weren't working. What are some of the interventions that you're finding have been successful?
So oftentimes, before we had a program like this, someone would get arrested, they would go to jail, they would serve their sentence, and then they would get released. And there was no planning for what their life would look like after they got out of jail. And they would be homeless, they would not have easy access to treatment, they would not have an ability for a lot of these individuals to get those services on their own. And it would take only a matter of days or weeks before they were arrested on a new charge and they were back in the system. and they would come back repeatedly week after week, month after month, year after year for some of these individuals. Same with using the emergency room. They would have medical issues that would persist when they lived on the street. They'd get treatment at the emergency room and then be released back out onto the street. So we've looked at ways to address that. Primarily, we've been focused on housing, and the mayor has made a huge effort to try and bring more housing for this population to Everett. We've seen some early success based on his effort to get individuals into housing, and those individuals are already having less contact with the emergency room in the jail for having a place to go when they get released, and those surrounding services that help support their life in there. So help with chemical dependency, help with mental health, and help with just daily case management.
Well, great. Well, let's shift gears and talk a little bit about diversion. And before we talk specifically about work crew, can you explain the concept of diversion or alternative sentencing and how it differs from the traditional prosecution model?
Sure. A diversion is any program that diverts an individual out of the criminal justice system into a program or service that is better able to address those issues that led to criminal behavior. And so there are diversion programs that are based in police departments. There is a diversion program based in our municipal court called the court monitored diversion, where a person has to fulfill certain treatment requirements, report to court, and if they do all those things, their charges are dismissed. And then our office has diversion programs where we hold off on filing criminal charges in exchange for a person doing something that we ask them to do, and if they do that, we don't file criminal charges. For a prosecutor, a diversion program is something that the American Bar Association recommends all prosecutors use as a tool and find ways to partner with your community to develop diversion programs that will help meet the needs of individuals who may find themselves in the criminal justice system for these low-level offenses. They're particularly helpful for us because when those individuals get those services, it frees us up to address other people who are appropriate for courts, are appropriate for prosecution, and are appropriate for jail and the other work that we traditionally do.
And I know diversion was one of the 3 prongs of the Mayor's Safe Streets plan that he announced last fall: diversion enforcement and housing. And specifically, the establishing a work crew was part of that plan. That was one of the recommendations of the Streets Initiative Task Force that they put out in their final report. Can you talk a little bit specifically about that program, how it's going to work, and what we hope it will accomplish?
Sure. And I should say we have run diversion programs already in our office. So for individuals who commit a shoplift, we then send them off into a pre-charge diversion program. We also have a relicensing assistance program for people who are driving without a license. They can get assistance in getting a license and getting court fines reduced by getting that license back. And we've partnered with a company, nonprofit called Friendship Diversion Services. And so we are going to partner with them again to operate a work crew program. And this work crew came out of the Streets Initiative. And the idea is for those individuals who may be living on the street, may be experiencing homelessness, may be committing those crimes related to life on the street. We see a lot of trespass, a lot of shoplift, some criminal mischief, graffiti, crimes such as that. Jail and courts have not been a big deterrent in changing people's behavior. And getting people an opportunity to give back as a form of community restitution, allowing people to go, what we plan to do is have individuals out picking up garbage off the street, sweeping sidewalks, cleaning bushes, picking up needles, and focused on those areas that have been particularly impacted by the street-level social issues that were the subject of the Streets Initiative Task Force.
And I'm sure people are curious about some of the specifics of it. It's going to be starting up this month, and how will the work crew be supervised, and what area are they going to be addressing?
So there is a retired police officer who will be the supervisor, and so he will be managing those crews. He'll be working with individuals. He will be making sure that they stay on task. They will be focused on the area from the Broadway, from Everett Avenue up to 41st, and then down towards the Transit Center, and in that area primarily. They're going to be focused in picking up along the streets. They're going to be starting small with a couple of crews out there in the morning and the afternoon. And they will also be learning some soft skills, partnering with some employment groups and partnering with some social service agencies to provide education and encouragement for individuals to try and begin to think about a different way of approaching their situation, and hopefully get individuals encouraged to make different choices that will lead to a life not living on the street or involved in the kinds of activities that are visible and have been a real impact on the businesses in that area.
Well, great. Anything else you want to add on about the Streets Initiative in general, or about the work crew that you think the public might want to know?
The Streets Initiative has been a really important process for our office. We have learned a lot about the services that are available in the community. And as we begin to think about diversion programs and addressing mental health, homelessness, drug addiction within our criminal justice system, we have had a lot of conversations from that experience that allow us to develop programs that we believe will be successful, that will make the community safer, and will also be more efficient and use our public resources in ways that are effective and have some long-term impacts, not just for those individuals who may be charged with a crime, but also for our neighbors and for the community, so that everybody is working on the long-term solutions that will make us safer and stronger.
Well, thank you so much for joining us today. It's good to get your perspective as somebody who's really working on this on a day-to-day basis.
Thank you for having me. It's been very enjoyable.
Well, thank you for joining us, and we hope you'll be back next month for our next Mayor's Update.